Let me guess, you clicked on this video because you're going through a thing at work and you're wondering if it's just you. Well, you're in luck, because in this video, I'm going to be breaking down some signs that you're actually working for a toxic boss. Hi everybody and welcome. If you're new here, my name is Brian. I'm a career coach, a corporate recruiter, an HR professional, and I'm also a hiring manager. So I'm going to give you my perspective on what you should be looking for if you're actually dealing with that toxic boss. Because let's face it, working with a toxic boss is one of the most common reasons why people experience career dissatisfaction. And in fact, it's one of the most common things that we discuss in my private one-on-one coaching sessions. So the first sign of a bad boss is that they always seem to be critical of you. Now, of course, it is your boss's job to manage your performance and point out areas where you can improve in. However, when the boss crosses the line from constructive criticism into constant negativity, then it becomes a toxic situation. And here's one of the telltale signs. Everything you do, your boss seems to find some level of fault with it. In some cases, they'll move the goalpost so you can never seem to please them and meet expectations. And it's really a hopeless situation, because if the boss is overly critical or overly negative, it's going to stunt your career growth, and they may actually view you as somebody they don't see long-term potential with. And if that's the case, you obviously want to take proactive steps and act like a free agent to start updating your resume and finding a better situation for yourself. Now, the second major sign to look for is if they micromanage you on top of it. And normally when you have an overly critical boss, they're also usually looking over your shoulder and micromanaging every step that you make. And you really need to look at this as a form of control. If they're looking over your shoulder that deeply at the type of work that you're doing, it shows that they don't trust you, or more importantly, they don't trust themselves, because a micromanaging boss is usually so focused on a very specific way of doing something that they can't see the big picture, and they're often worried about failure themselves. And the polar opposite of the micromanaging boss is the boss that's never there. And honestly, this could be just as bad, because when you have a boss that's never there, it's really hard to get things done. It's hard to get approvals and blessings on things. And it's really hard to make sure that you're aligned properly to departmental goals. And not to mention, we all need help clearing roadblocks from time to time. And if you have an absenteeism boss, or a boss that just simply never is available, then that can be a big problem. And in my early career, I actually experienced this. I had a boss that used to sit in the back corner office and never met with me, never gave directions, never gave expectations, and seemingly left me on my own. So I did take initiative to try to set meetings on their calendar, because I felt like I kind of needed to do that so they knew what I was working on. And I wanted some sort of positive reinforcement that, yeah, you're actually meeting expectations, you're doing what you should be doing, and to try to get some development. But that particular boss never seemed to make me a priority. And I'll always remember my very first professional performance appraisal, where I was sitting with this boss. And during the meeting, it was very clear that he didn't prepare anything. He hadn't taken any notes of my performance, and actually told me to write my own. And it even gets better. He canceled the meeting twice, where I had to reschedule it. And when I finally did get in front of him for that face-to-face, his phone rang and he picked it up, and it was actually somebody that he knew personally. So he took this personal phone call, and I'm just sitting there waiting, going. And after about 5 or 6 minutes, I said, I'm just going to excuse myself. You can just call me when you're ready. And I left and walked out the door, and he kind of did one of these things. He never brought it back up again. We never rescheduled the performance appraisal, and I just let it go. And it's really disappointing, because at that point in my career, I really needed the guidance and development of a strong boss, and he just wasn't providing it for me. So obviously, I didn't stick around much longer after that. The next sign that you might be working for a toxic boss is that they reprimand you in public. If they've got some performance issue with you specifically, they should be taking it behind closed doors and addressing it with you directly. They should not be taking it in front of a group setting. So if your boss makes it a habit of chewing you out in very public settings, especially in business meetings, it's definitely a sign that you have a toxic situation, and you probably want to update your resume. Taking that a step further is that if you have a boss that doesn't support you properly. So a good boss is going to stand up for their people and potentially take one for the team. And if they have that issue, again, they're not doing it in a public setting, they're pulling you aside and giving you that coaching. And I've been in uncomfortable business meetings before where I was not properly supported by my boss, and it's very uncomfortable, because a good boss always has their people's back, and their employees are going to do their best work when they know that they're supported. The next major sign that your boss may be toxic is that they don't give you proper feedback or direction. Just like my example earlier in the performance appraisal, I wasn't getting very clear direction, I wasn't getting clear feedback, and I had no idea what my boss expected of me. And to be honest with you, it made for a very uncomfortable workplace, because I was going in every day and guessing at what I should be doing, but didn't have anybody truly setting expectations, telling me how I could measure my success, and whether or not I was doing a good job or not. And again, there's nothing worse than trying to go and solicit that feedback and being told, I don't have time for you right now. And I guess this has the makings of a good behavior-based interview answer of, give me an example of a time when you worked without clear direction and how you approached it. But nonetheless, it is better to get feedback regularly from your boss. And if your boss is never available or willing to provide you that feedback, it can be a toxic situation and certainly can stunt your career growth. If you're in that situation, I would recommend that you try to set up weekly one-on-one cadences with your boss to try to get that feedback. The next major sign that you're working for a toxic boss is that your ideas are constantly turned down. So if you're trying to make your mark on the organization and hopefully set yourself up for a promotion in the future, yet your boss never seems to pay attention or take your ideas seriously, or even worse, shoots them down, or potentially hijacks them and turns them into something completely different, it can be very deflating. And a toxic boss is not even aware that they're doing it. But essentially what they're doing is demotivating you to the point where they're sabotaging your career potential. Because a good boss should be encouraging of your ideas and at least hearing them out and giving constructive feedback on them. But a toxic boss will simply take your ideas, crush them up, and throw them in the garbage can. So if you're dealing with that situation, it might be worth updating your resume as well and thinking about getting out. But unfortunately, it can get worse because a boss who doesn't take the time to consider your ideas is probably also not going to recognize your accomplishments. Or even worse, your boss takes credit for your accomplishments in front of others. And this type of boss typically is also pretty weaselly and doesn't take blame for anything. Then when things don't go right and they're feeling the heat, they're typically quick to throw you under the bus instead of them. The next sign that your boss might be toxic is that they don't respect your personal boundaries. Perhaps they assign you something just as you're walking out the door, or they make underhanded comments about your work ethic. I once had a boss that made me feel bad after leaving my job after 12 hours of working because we were in plant launch. When I went in and said, I think I'm going to wrap up for the day, I remember she looked up and she said, oh, you're leaving so soon? I remember thinking to myself, like, I've already worked 12 hours. What else do you want? They're also known to call or blow up your phone on off days. You could be sitting on a beach somewhere with your family and they're asking you to pull files or to send an email off. These types of bosses have no respect for your professional boundaries or your work-life balance. You have to establish them yourself. You're looking for a way to establish these boundaries. I made another video for that and I will leave a link for it. The last toxic trait that I want to cover in today's video is when the boss asks you to do something that's either unsafe or unethical. You should never place yourself into a situation where you're doing something unsafe or that compromises your professional integrity, because no job and no boss is worth risking your life, your limb, or your professional reputation. Because that stuff will follow you. You have to act like a free agent and you have to say no. And if your boss doesn't take kindly to your pushing back, you either need to escalate it to the next level or remove yourself from the situation. Now, there's probably a dozen more signs that we could cover in today's video, but these are the most common ones that I see with my coaching clients. So if you're dealing with any one of these and you're not sure how to react to it, you can actually contact me to set up a private one-on-one coaching session and we can work through it. But in general, toxic bosses don't change, and that's the number one reason why people leave. So if you're looking around your organization and other people are leaving for the same reasons, it's probably a good indicator that it might be time for you to also update your resume and get out. Now, if you're somebody that doesn't know how to update your resume, it's actually something that I specialize in. I actually have a website called alifeafterlayoff.com. It's loaded with tips and tricks, all from an insider's perspective. And I've actually created some training on how to write your resume. It's called Resume Rocketfuel. It's designed to teach you exactly how to write a resume. It's going to give you the best chance of having that recruiter pick up a phone and give you that first round interview. But not only that, it's also going to teach you how to customize your resume. It's going to include some templates, and it's going to give you some strategy about how you can use the resume to your advantage. So it's a really robust training, and there's nothing else like it on the market. So I highly encourage you to check it out if you're considering a more professional resume. And once you get that first round interview, that's then up to you to sell yourself throughout the rest of the process. And that's where the Ultimate Job Seeker Bootcamp comes in. It breaks down each step of the hiring process, gives you detailed tips and tricks on how to navigate through it and ultimately to end up with your dream offer. Hey, I know how difficult it can be working for a toxic boss. I've worked for them myself. There is a solution to it, and it is acting like a free agent and taking ownership of your career. So hopefully this video has helped highlight some signs that you can look for if you're wondering if you're working for that toxic boss. Thank you for watching, and as always, we'll see you on the next one.